So, as far as a lot of
or something happens, I'm actually going to have to say, it's probably easier to say urgent care. And then you have urgent care saying, like, no, you care about something.
A lot of different things that I don't.
But to their credit, every single time they call for anything,
I also like to get,
they've always
with
said,
my,
things like that. Yeah, really, so I guess it has to be somebody who's not waiting. I would want it to be
focus on is clarity prior to consensus.
Yeah. That's my problem.
There's so much willingness to sign malicious
misunderstanding about what's really going on right now when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like, we're not fighting any kind of it's not blatant like that. It's not like you're throwing stuff. What is happening now is what I can call ideas and social acceptance. And they don't.
It's the front stages and the back stages.
Yeah, and there's but I honestly don't believe it's malicious. I really feel like we don't know what you don't know.
Some of it is really and some of it is young people being schools or whatever. That's usually the threat.
I was always like after Waunakee, like
I start to have concerns to me and like responsibility for
a lot of disappointment about all of that. I really mean, I don't subscribe to the whole like.
I'm glad. I saw your video when you were talking about your daughter.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that for me, and you'll have to correct me. I felt like some result there. It's like, you want to accept this is not us to agree this is to me that is where I would want to ask, is that what you're doing? Right?
Oh.
Acting in this way, accepting this mindset. That's why it's really and so it's when I think the concern is the collective ways that people are being able to say, well, people are saying that you're not acting in a certain way that you can control. So I think that's what others are like. Does that make sense? You see that?
I understand what you mean. I realize I understand.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I understand. The problem with silence is, or not saying anything sometimes, is that's agreement. And again, there's some very specific situations in which folks were silent that it looked very much as though they were in agreement with some very bad actions.
Yeah, so I think if you're in the presence, this is what I would do, and I've actually spoken up in community versus you're like in a checkout. That person not looking like them. And they're extremely rude to me. You can see that they're just talking constantly. I've actually
Yeah.
I said, excuse me, they're doing their job, they're helping you.
Right.
I mean, your bad day doesn't equate to
Right.
abusing them. And like, people look at me like I'm just crazy.
Right.
But like, I can't. I'm very much into it. I go to big lines. I've done it before. And, you know, kind of stuff like this. It was a very, very good old place.
Oh, really?
But I used to, I grew up in Phillips. I left the Minnesota place too. But it was a big conversation. I put on very impressed with the even when we met my wife and she said, well, we're the youngest one here, and so I was like,
sometimes I'll take women
Yeah.
to describe it.
Oh, no.
That's where I think maybe there's a misinterpretation. I know it's hard. It's such a hard
It's not, I don't say that. Again, if you were to understand. No. I mean, again, if you were to, this is where, understand and this is why I so often do share and I have different Zoom and all that kind of stuff about different things. Because I think you need to, in order to really understand what you're doing. What you're talking about, you really need to understand it for the context that there is a known frame of reference, something that you can identify with.
your own lens like a white
Exactly. Whatever. I mean, yeah, and I think, unfortunately, now I'm getting a bad penalty, and that's, unfortunate. So it's hard to take some of that stuff seriously anymore because some things get so abused. But well, to be unbelievable. It's so abused. For a lot of reasons. Just buzzwords and there's a lot of misunderstanding. But I do think that have conversations. Because I think we really and truly have when we have different and that we can build a bridge upon those things that we have in common that will help us also appreciate each other's differences. I see nothing wrong with that, and I think that's a beautiful thing. When those differences or recognizing those differences cause negative. Sorry.
You guys, I wasn't wanting to interrupt your story. Come on, let me break that up. I was waiting for a few minutes anyway to see. I was just commenting, you guys let it hear. We had a listening session at one time that we had roughly 100 people to say.
Oh, wow.
And so we were regressing. As far as participation goes.
You can't compete with weather.
That's true.
Wow.
It is summer. When was that in the dead of winter?
January. Like January 5th or something like that.
Like we had a Zoom one with maybe 40 people once, 30 on the Zoom one.
That was, I think, at the time where people were like, we can do this.
Right. I hadn't planned on saying it. I was going to listen myself.
So welcome. I wish we had more people to have more discussions, but
I'm glad you set this up for me, Sandra.
Exactly. We're having a live discussion. Would you like to listen in? No.
Would you like to listen?
that's what we're here for. Is exactly what you're saying. This is a great opportunity for me and other board members that choose to attend, and the public, if they can hear this, which I hope they can, just to give us your opinions on different topics and what you want to know about, and for me to hear from you.
Oh my gosh, he's honest.
You guys had significant pressure now.
Well, we're going to
We're
drive
already-
one here.
We're besties already, so that's already happened. Just in the last few minutes.
Well, it's interesting because I think we have very divergent views on a lot of some things, but I think we have a lot of similar commonalities that we can bring together too.
I agree.
And the conversation that we were just having personally, it's so much better to have than all this social media stuff.
Agreed.
And I mean, I think we're both local people.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know. Most of the time. But anyway.
So really, that's what this is about. It's just open floor, different topics, whatever you want to hear about. If we have answers, we'll give answers. If you just want to share opinions, I'll say thank you for your opinions. And
Oh my gosh, I was not planning on speaking just like that.
I was just here to listen.
We're gonna have a quiet meeting.
all right.
Do you have anything?
Do I? Go first, so that I can shoot you down.
All right, yeah. All right, get ready. Start taking notes so you can get some. No, I think one thing I saw that we're getting like 1 million from coronavirus money.
1.4 million.
1.4 million.
CARES Act.
And one of the things that I was just gonna say that if this came up was, I didn't plan on it. I really didn't. Was I think it would be great to have that money go towards the largest amount of people that will be affected by it, as far as whether it's capital expenditures. You guys were talking about, furnace issues that have been put off year after year. But the biggest expenditures that might be foisted upon the larger community that will affect everyone equally, I think it would be a nice thing to have that money, a large portion of that money, be put towards those things that will then affect the most people that would otherwise have to bear that on the tax base. I think that would be a great focus for that money. I will always 100% tell you to do as much as the police department wants of that money. Sorry. But our security in our community, I think, is paramount. And I know that I don't know how aged the building is or anything, but those greater tax base issues, I think there's some individual things that could potentially be done. I know that there's some talk about the low-income housing fund. Is that correct? It's got like $400,000 in it or something.
I don't think we're using the term low-income housing, but yes.
Well, I'm sorry.
Just housing. Go ahead, though. Yeah.
The housing program. It sounded like there was a lot of money comparatively to other communities that have been placed in that for a significant reason too. There's some issues with offsetting TIF and things like that. And I think that's a definitely worthwhile thing. However, that's going to affect a very small number of people. So that was my kind of offsetting to affecting the most amount of people to affecting a very small amount of people. Now, obviously, there's some people that need more economic assistance than others, for sure. So that's kind of my thought process on that. Since you're the only one wanting anything.
I would just say if you want to check the village board packet that is publicly on base now, you can take a look at this, the staff slides that have been put together for the board meeting next Monday. Having taken feedback from the board and done further research, it's sort of version 2 of a staff recommendation, and that'll be before the board on Monday. It breaks down different projects into things that staff recommends the board approve immediately, items that the board give conceptual approval to, so staff can then sort of go work at assembling specifics on those functions, and then other potential projects that we're suggesting be sort of put on the side burner at the moment. So you can pull up the packet and take a look at what those recommendations are like.
And I know there's like 16 or so different boxes of what the government says you can use it for on there, and so there's obviously a lot of ideas. I guess another thought process would be that the things that we potentially would put off now that might not be in the next budget, but if we put them off long-term in the future, that will cost us more. And maybe that there's an emphasis on those, long-term economic incursions that we have that are just going to get more expensive and more expensive. And if we could, staunch those now, rather than those ones that are going up at a higher rate, then maybe other issues, maybe those are two mindsets going forward about looking at that money.
You'll see that there is some significant capital expense recommendations. But the decision-making will be occurring by the board either next Monday or future meetings.
So do you have examples, can you say, for the whole, what kind of things are you doing along those lines?
You mean as far as the capital expenditures?
Yeah, just expenditures of as funds, and then you said that you'd like to see it, that affects a lot of people versus a small people.
Well, right, I think like what I said before and what was in the meeting talking about facilities. I mean, there's no choice on upkeeping facilities. And right now with our building economy, things are just getting more expensive and more expensive. It's never going to be cheaper to build in the future. You know, usually it's not. So there was some comments about those, and obviously the department heads are not privy to those things. They've always got their lists. I mean, you guys know way better than I do. That they're always going to have their list of things that they're going to put in the next budget, and then they're going to have that list next to that they just know aren't going to get filled, so they're going to leave it off that list, and there's some conversation about that. So firm, concrete examples of those kind of things, I don't have those for you, Chris, but it's the concept of those things that will cost the larger tax base a large expense that maybe we can get taken care of now, so that doesn't come on the tax base with that money. So it affects everybody. It's that tax base issue rather than necessarily putting in a majority or a large amount towards individual projects that will affect small groups of people. I think there's some good in that too. I mean, there was the Waunakee Neighborhood Connect comment that I don't know exactly what they're talking about going to, but if there's some assistance in there with food pantry stuff and helping those that have that economic need, maybe putting some of that towards that, a smaller amount that will help that smaller group, but obviously an economically needed function. Just like they said on the video that can be, tracked that it's helping Waunakee residents, because that's what the money has to be for, according to the government guidelines. I think that's reasonable too, that it's going to that direct assistance. I have some personal concerns with just things that are going on, largely that did not go towards certain more partisan conversations that are going on that different groups might be having. Going towards, yeah, anyway.
Do you not want to say that one?
No, I do. But yeah, we can talk about, like, there's a lot of partisan things that are going on with issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And because we don't have, like I talked about at one meeting, I came and talked about, and Todd and I had, I don't know, was that late May that we had a meeting together, Todd?
Probably.
That we talked about, like, what does diversity, what does equity, what does inclusion mean? And Todd told me that we don't have definable terms for those things, and it's right in our, on our front page of our village website, that we are committed to those beliefs, it says in there. But we don't have those beliefs defined for a very transparent knowledge from us, the citizens, to know what are those beliefs, what do those terms mean, and where are they going to be much more transparent. Todd mentioned that there's is it you, Todd, only that's in the 18-month program with the international? That's where those terms are going to be defined, is what you talked about?
I'm working on helping the board and the community establish I guess you could call it a strategic plan moving forward on addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what that plan looks like will be dependent on a process that I engage the board and the community in over the next 12 months. And certainly in that process, there will be defined definition that occurs. I guess that doesn't necessarily mean that the board doesn't have perceptions on what some of those concepts mean today, but as far as putting on paper, that'll be part of that process.
Well, and I think that's a good point, is that the board, if the board does have concepts of what those terms mean right now, I'd really like to know what that is. And I think that that's reasonable.
I mean, what I've heard the board saying in several settings is that they desire the community to be welcoming to all. I've heard you use that sort of phrasing quite often about how you view our work in this area. and recognizing and learning that it isn't, helps direct our attention to where we can work, where we can put some effort towards. So I don't know if you have other context to that.
No, you spoke well for me. But I would say, with regards to this topic, it's a work in progress. We not only want to keep throughout our state, every community, all across our country, all across the world. We can look at this issue as one that is a very difficult one to get your arms and hands around it. It's just going to be, no matter what. Because people have good views, strong views that have been, they didn't even know they were getting those views, and they have those views. Just because of what's happening around them. There's others that, hey, my parents they weren't very nice people when you think about it. I'm not, sorry, Mom and Dad, I'm not, as an example, they weren't that people at all. But just acknowledging and then listening and learning from one another. And we're doing that, and we have been with the Whole Trump Nation, which is also on our board meeting for Monday night. This is a great example. Sam, one of the first meetings I had with Sam when he was elected to the board was he wanted to see the pride flag flown. And, shocking to everybody, when a board member asks me to put something on the agenda, I do it. I don't think I've ever said no. Opposed. You're talking about social media. I was concerned that we needed to have a policy in place for if we were going to be flying flags. We didn't have anything in place. So I said that, well, social media all of a sudden says, we block it, or the board's doing this to try to delay it, and it wasn't anything to do with it. We just wanted to have something in place. But that's social media, what you were getting at, and that hostility that's taking place. Things don't just happen.
Right. And I think
without any thought. And that's really what it was. Yeah, we voted to put the flag up right away, but we said we need to have a policy in place as soon as possible so we don't have other things that could balloon and mushroom into other issues that we might have to confront. So that topic of DEI is really unfolding.
Sure.
Finding it is really a difficult thing. So each word could have its own meaning for me. That might be different from Sam, which may be different from you, Greg, which may be different from Mary Ellen here. That's just the nature of what's happening with that. And by the way, I named everybody who's white in that.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I just named everybody who is a white person. Okay? So those views amongst white people are going to be different. Then you add in the views of all the different races that are out there, and you're going to have all this.
No, I agree. I think where I'm coming from is, and I want to be very clear, because social media is going to brand people that say certain things. I don't have any notions that we don't have racism in our country, that there's not racist acts that occur at Waunakee. Some of the comments that I've been bringing to school board, to the village board, is more of the issue of systemic racism, like in the book that the village gave money for. Makes it very clear that it's whites that are consciously oppressing blacks as a systemic group. And I think to foist that upon just one group because of the color of the skin, that's where I think that there's a problem, because it creates, and we all know this conversation, naturally that's going on, it creates, one group that feels like they are now maybe the oppressor, and another group that are oppressed and they're victims, so what can they do about it? And I don't want that to be the tone here in Waunakee. I want us to address individual acts that are abhorrent, and they should be. I stood up against them myself, and I always went, we were just having a conversation about that. I would never let that go quietly, happening in front of me. But what you have just said, that there are things in Waunakee, I think it was you, Chris, or maybe it was you, Todd, stated that there are things here that are blocking that, what was the phrase, the welcoming, making Waunakee a welcoming village. If you believe there's things that are blocking that, I'd like to know what those specifically are. And maybe that would help define what Waunakee is talking about when It's in our front page policy of our inclusion, you know, our equity statement or diversity, equity, inclusion statement, saying that we put forth these beliefs. I mean, that's a strong statement. And you just had a good point. Each of us all sitting around here could have different definitions of those. So having some more transparent information on what the village is talking about, I think would be extremely helpful.
And that's probably what I was getting at, or Todd went with that, is I've embraced this, that we want to be a welcoming community. The things that are done should be welcoming.
Yeah.
The things that are not welcoming, we should talk about. And address, and hopefully people will embrace that.
Well, right, and so I want to hold you to that comment, though. That there are things that are blocking that ability to be a welcoming village. I'd like to know what the board thinks those are, so that we know where the board is going.
Sure, and we will probably disagree on what those things are too. That's the
We may
issue.
not.
So we'll agree on some and disagree
Yeah.
on others. That's what I'm getting at with this. So, you know, you can talk about different things. You know, you could say, okay, well, we've priced the market out that minorities and others can't live here. Is that true? Some people will say that. Was that an intent? I don't believe it was ever an intent to be that way. But people will say that.
But is that systemic racism? That's my concern, that people say that stuff.
Does that matter? If there's an issue, regardless of whether you or anybody thinks it's a systemic racism problem, if it's a problem and we can identify, or they are able to identify that it's an issue that's disproportionately affecting a particular group of people, shouldn't that just simply be addressed or not?
It should, but is it addressing a group of people because of the color of their skin or their economic position? And how are we correlating those things?
And I would tell you that it's probably a little both.
And it very well could be. It very well could be. And I'm not against addressing those things.
Right.
But it's the aspect when we assign fault to groups because of their demographics.
Sure.
That's one of my big concerns.
See, it's hard because this is what's happened.
Yeah.
We can agree, but there's different ways that people say, no, I see it this way, I see it this way. And this one's red, this one's green, this one's orange. You can go, and people have that. And what we as a board, or at least I can't speak for the other board members. I have to put that disclaimer in there every time. Because they can speak for themselves. We want this to be a welcoming community. And from that, we can try to address the things that are out there. That's how I do this. They may do it. These two board members may do that differently. And the other four may do it even different than here. So it's really trying to, in my role, I'm trying to pull everybody together.
Sure.
That we can address it all and come to somewhat of an agreement. The issue is that when you come to somewhat of an agreement, you haven't come to a true agreement. If that makes sense.
You've come to a compromise.
Yes. And when you come to compromise, there's group over here that's going to say, no way. You have this group over here that's going to say, no way. And then you got this group that's going to be, okay. That's kind of how that all seems to play. And I've been doing this long enough to see that. Different issues as we go on.
Maybe if I could, Chris, I brought up the webpage on the Village's DEI webpage, and it's not long. I'm willing to read sort of the statement, the policy that the village board has approved. I think it's always it can be tricky to pull out a phrase or a word and set it aside on its own to define more broadly. I think it's really important to hear the entirety of this, so it won't take long if I could just read it.
Go ahead.
The village
Does anybody
Waunakee.
object? This is a listening.
No, I have it right here too, and I agree with the majority of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, the village Waunakee supports the fair and equal treatment of all human beings, denounces racism in all its forms, and has declared its commitment to the advancement of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And committing to these beliefs, the village board has resolved the following. The village board unequivocally condemns any acts of violence or harassment that are perpetrated as a reaction to a person's race, color, national origin, age, disability, religion, ancestry, sexual orientation, gender identity, spousal affiliation, sex, or socioeconomic status. And the village board supports the fair and equitable treatment of all human beings in a just society and strongly denounces racism in all its forms, systemic or otherwise. And the village board affirms its belief that when one member of the Waunakee community is devalued, all are devalued. Further, the village board recognizes that words have power, can cause real and tangible harm to individuals, and tear at the fabric of our community. And the village board stands in solidarity with the Waunakee community, communities of color, and those negatively impacted by physically, emotionally, mentally, and or economically by racism resulting from inherent biases and prejudice. And this is the last one. The village board recognizes the role it plays in fostering a healthy and prosperous environment for all residents of Waunakee and commits to the meaningful advancement of equity, diversity, and inclusion in its community dialogue, services, programs, and policies. So that's the entirety of that statement. And I know you've seen it, Greg. I just want to make sure everyone here has a clear understanding of that statement and how we're discussing it today.
And I think the only concern I have with that is in the second point when it uses the term systemic. And what does that mean? I mean, are we sitting here believing that our community of the village of Waunakee is an inherently racist community? And again, in the very last statement, what does it mean for the advancement of equity, diversity, and inclusion? And I know that you say it's hard to do, but I don't think I'll let off the gas pedal about wanting to know what that means here, because that provides transparency in where we're going and where we're being led as a community. And I agree with 99% of that. Those are my concerns with that.
Any other concerns? Marinella, with the statement, did you hear everything?
I'm having a hard time hearing it here, so I couldn't catch all of that.
Okay.
Well, do you want
Yes?
No, that's okay.
Yes, anything you had heard there that would be challenging?
Come on.
I came to listen. I think that would be a conversation we'll have at another time, but I commend the village for taking a stance on something that personally I don't think should be a partisan issue. I think making Waunakee a welcoming community to all people is an admirable goal, but I don't think too many people could disagree with, so I think that's fantastic. I think getting hung up in semantics and wordplay could prevent you from really doing all that really needs to be done. I think there's issues here. I think the reason why, and I'm not saying that there's an issue with everybody. I think the reason why some people could perhaps believe there's not an issue in Waunakee is because they have not experienced it for themselves, or they don't necessarily recognize it when they see it. And quite frankly, people that do experience issues aren't always willing to open up and share those because there is backlash that goes along with that. There's situations that I can think of right now that are happening amongst some people that are being, it's a particular group of minorities here that are being treated very poorly. And people are able to get away with it because perhaps a language barrier, I'll say that much. That's a problem. And the fact that people will allow something like that to go on is a problem. I mean, that's just one example. That's one example, and if you knew really all the details behind that and so many other situations, you'd probably be very appalled. I think a lot of people would. I think the fact that the village is willing to help lead the charge, as they should, if they're going to be representing this community, I think is exactly the right start. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. I don't think it's going to be perfect for anybody. But the fact that they're willing to make the changes or start to take a look and start to see ways that they can eliminate issues like the one that I'm kind of alluding to, and I don't want to go into details about that, just for privacy's sake, for some of the people involved with that situation, that particular situation. But I don't think there's anything, I guess I'm more concerned of what is the fear behind those words, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think if they're done right, the focus isn't on whether or not it's systemic and whether everybody in the village is racist or inherently racist. I think if it's done right, the focus is on the results and ultimately making everybody who comes into our community feel welcome. It says something when you have families and people of color that are willing to leave this community and move away because of the experiences that they're having here. That's sad. And the fact that that has already happened is indicative that there's a problem. The fact that, just a few years ago, I don't remember exactly what it was, there was a family and the father of that particular family, who was a black family, wrote an article in the paper and about why he and his family were leaving. And some of the response to that was good riddance. He had no business. I mean, we don't want people like that here anyway. That's actually happening in the year of our Lord, 2021. That's crazy to me. And I would never have guessed that. I picked this community to make our home because it reminded me of where I grew up and with the values that we grew up, where everybody was part of the community. It was a very different time than it is now, obviously. And so it saddens me when that's not the experience everyone is having. The things that I'm seeing, me personally, things that are being shared with me personally that happen in this community are things that blow my mind. So I think there needs, when people say there is racism, when people say there is no discrimination, everybody's, it's all about a personal responsibility. No, there's more to it than that. It's not quite that simple. It's not quite as simple as dealing with the one person who's doing the thing or not. There's more to it. So I think there's a lot of education that's needed. I think not only is there education, and I commend the study, I think there needs to be more education on, okay, but what do we do? Either, what's the next step? How do I deal with that? How do we provide the community with the kind of training that they need in order to truly make the entire village a welcoming community to be in? I think that should be really, honestly, part of the next focus. And I don't know what that looks like. I know the efforts that I and some others are trying to put into equip people. And that's not about a party, it's not about a political thing, it's not about trying to brainwash anybody, it's just, you don't know what you don't know. So that's just people like me who have the first-hand experience and have heard from others with the first-hand experience of what's not okay in this village, sharing that with other people and sharing, okay, so this is what you can do when you see those things. And this is how you do it. So that I would say that.
I agree that making this a welcoming place for everyone is 100% a wonderful thing. And you talk about people speaking out in fear of retribution. What I'm doing right now is extremely risky for me, for the backlash that I can receive, 100%. I'm not equating it to different, racial groups that have experienced those things, but me saying these things could definitely create backlash for me. I don't want to go with the underlying supposition that people are fearful of the words DEI. It's the concern about, diversity, equity, inclusion, those things are very good things to think about, the words that the general people around us, the majority of America would equate with those things, are good things. But they can also usher in, as you said, we need to think about what the results are and how to get there. Sometimes when you've got a solution and you're trying to, find out where the problem is. It's, that to me can be backwards. And it doesn't always become a transparent thing. And like I said, I don't want to be labeled as fearful, because I don't think that that's good to just say that people are fearful of this.
Okay.
But so I think, the transparency would be extremely helpful for a lot of people that have concerns about what this means, or is it partisan? I think there's a lot of that concern out here, that it's being used to push partisan goals. And that's one of my biggest concerns. And you talk about not only holding an individual responsible, but I think individuals do hold most responsibility. Can we, as a community, come together to hold those individuals responsible? 100%. But I don't believe in labeling our community as a certain this or that, in a way that's why we have this problem, because that is how our community is, or the systemic, again, I go back to the systemic racism thing, because that is a big theme of a lot of this. And those are my concerns. I hope I made myself clear, that I as much want to make this a welcoming place for everyone of every demographic. But I don't want to be using things that feel prejudice or seem prejudice or are prejudice to label an entire group in the means, and this is where I'm talking about, to get to a certain result. And that's where I say, getting to a certain result, and then regardless of the means have to be addressed also. And we can't be using racism to fight racism, or prejudice to fight prejudice. I mean, there is a horrible, in my view, national theme going on with police right now. And I think it's horribly prejudiced and biased to look at somebody in uniform and say, this is what I think about them, or that they're using these tactics towards a certain group of people, because I think that's just prejudice on top of prejudice. And I don't want to, I'm willing to speak out towards that. You're just laughing at us over here. Thank you, Cassandra.
Not at all. I'm listening very intently.
It became a listening.
Right.
Listening very, that's what listening is for. I would say this, to add to what you're saying. Cassie made a comment about people need to be educated, and people need to. So, this issue for me comes down to a choice. Right? People are going to choose whether they want to do this or not. And for us to force people is wrong, in my opinion. People are going to live their lives the way they should have their freedoms to do that. And as we go through and we put things out in an educational way, it has to be their choice to embrace or not embrace. Some will just say, whatever. But those who are on one side, this is just whatever out here. They don't really care. They don't want it. They don't believe it. They don't believe it's happening. Fine. All right? But it's choice. Choice and choice when it comes to these issues. That's what it comes down to. And to try to force any community or any body of people to do something, it's generally going to fail. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
So that's my mindset on this. And so as we see those things and point things out, I'm always of the hope that the people who are not engaging will see others acting in an appropriate way that they can learn from them without even knowing they're learning. I go back to what I said before. Learn behaviors that just they see, whether it's our children to our seniors. Okay, the seniors in our community, very different world they grew up in. Okay, it's a very different world that I grew up in compared to what Sam was growing up in. Okay, Mary Island, we've all grown up in different times and different things. My daughter comments to me on this all the time. She's 27. She's like, you never had to worry about anything when you were growing up. Yeah, I did. I had to worry about nuclear bombs being dropped on us. That was big thing at that time. So there's always a fear, because she brings up 9/11, that's what her childhood, that happened. So she has this fear, things that could potentially happen. Okay? We all have those things in our backgrounds, right? This issue, we could talk for hours and hours and hours, and we'll be like this. We want to get to here, but we just keep kind of circling around it and we can't get here. I would just say to you that our initiatives are designed to make us a welcoming community. That's my goal. The definitions, I don't think we'll ever get to a true definition on each one, but we can probably bring clarity to that, which I think is what you're looking for.
Absolutely, and I think that would be very informative for a lot of people.
So to me, my clarity to you is to say, all right, welcoming community. That's what those three things are trying to accomplish. For all, as you said, regardless of their demographic.
Yeah.
Race.
And there's some things on there that I think, that I've seen, like the mental health aspects, acknowledging, indigenous lands. There's many other things on there I'm not remembering all right now. I think there's a lot of great things that are being done, so I don't want to be, labeled as Mr. Negative Nelly. I think, good, I hope not, and I hope that's not how it is.
Don't think that. This is a listening session. Everybody should respect everybody here today. We're going to have different opinions next time, depending on what the topic is, okay? I'm sure Sam and I have different opinions, and I'm sure Mariel and I have some different opinions.
I'm just thinking that we're assuming the community is one thing, but it's not. And every one of us has a different sense of what the community is. Our sense now is where we were when, as you were pointing out. And it's the people that we interact with on a daily basis. So we all each have our own small communities. We don't see ourselves as the whole of Waunakee. We are who we interact with. We are who we try to get to know, who we try to understand, who we have a history with. And, I still can't define what Waunakee really is. To me, it's the older section of town where I live, surrounded by all those little suburbs which are neighborhoods, which don't interact. The only places where the interaction truly takes place between different members of the communities is through the schools, through the churches, through the community organizations like sports, through the volunteer work, or the festivals that we have. I always like what Chris does when he tells people, introduce yourself to 3 people you don't know. I was born and raised here, grew up here, left for 30 years and came back, and it was a totally different community, and I have to adjust to that. But that doesn't destroy my love of what the community is. And as we go piece by piece, we learn, we expand our community so that we all may have some similar experiences to compare. But it's different depending on what age group you are.
Absolutely.
When I was growing up, it was the Irish and the German that were fighting all the time. And they would have had, those communities don't understand each other and aren't going to interact. So it's hard to pinpoint Waunakee as just one community.
Well, and I'll say, that since I've been in Waunakee since the middle of 2017, there is so much communication, there is so much neighborhood programming. I don't even want to say it's programming, it's so just natural get-togethers and stuff. And before this meeting even happened, Cassandra and I were talking, and I was suggesting that we have a conversation sometime. Go out and have lunch, and it is about who you interact with, and the more people you know, the better that you can, experience the community. But I also think that are there individuals in the community that have, done horrible things? Yes, and that's should always be spoken out against. But as a whole, I think this community is just great, and the school system, I'm so happy to be here, and the police that we have that are keeping us secure at night while they're up all night watching our back for all these car thieves that are going around King County. I can't thank them enough. I think we have a very wonderful community, and just like, you know, our Bill of Rights and Constitution, we were talking about that I'm very oriented in that, you know, fashion. States, we're always looking for a more perfect union, but it's never going to be perfect. But boy, do we have something to, I think it's wonderful.
Thanks for saying that. We love to hear that.
Oh.
Because it's so often not stated out in public, and the negatives seem to just boil up here, and that's what people want to talk about, whether it's negative or not, or creative, or real, all those things. Let's talk about different topics too tonight, if you guys have any others. But one thing I will say, our statement, my biggest fear in that, and I think the hardest thing to overcome, and I may get chastised on social media as a result of what I'm about to say, and I may get, but religions and the beliefs of those religions go against things that are stated in there, whether it's transgender, homosexual, with the different religious beliefs. And so that, I think that at times goes against it. Now, I'm all about separation of church and state. Okay, so I have to be blind to the religion side of it, and that statement works. But underneath it, it still exists. Because people's beliefs, if your beliefs and you have this religious faith, it's hard to say, all right, well, I'm not going to believe that part of it, so I can accept this. Does that make sense? Did I just blow them away?
Yeah, well, I totally see what you're saying, but again, in my constitutional head, the First Amendment does not say that we will be free from religion. It says that we will not, you know, use a system of religion for our government. So you having religious beliefs and having morals and stuff that, you know, go forward and, you know, affect your thinking, there's nothing wrong with that in government.
Correct. What I'm getting at is, to the point of people having a choice, it's hard to have a choice when your beliefs within that religious system go against some of the things we're talking about. That's what I'm getting at. It's not the government side, it's the people that have that choice.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of different views within those religions, whether that the things that you stated actually affect people's beliefs in those religions, whether they think that it's, you know, good or bad or what have you. I don't want to label it, and I don't think you're trying to do this, Chris.
I'm not.
You know, all religions say that these things are bad or that thing's bad. I think there's a lot of churches that are, you know, open to different, you know, interpretations of things. So, on all sides.
But what I'm getting at is just that's one of the other things that's a hurdle for people, is what I'm getting at. You know, growing up as a child, and you're going to whatever religious church, synagogue, whatever you're going to, and you're hearing this, and all of a sudden this is like, oh, this is what we're supposed to. It's very confusing to people, and they may not choose. That's what I'm saying, to be open. That's all. We all are free to choose what we want to do. That's what I'm saying. Government-wise, that doesn't come in for me. I separate. But I think that can be a challenge in our world. Most of the words are religious-based. So, it's just true.
Well, yeah, absolutely. In the world. And we have religious groups that are being killed right now.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
All right, on that note, let's go back to positive.
You're going to say something, Sandra, sorry.
Sorry.
Wow.
When's IV coming up, right?
When's IV coming?
Yeah, it is. The important stuff. No, and I know we're going to move on from that. I know what you're talking about as far as that whole thing with the, as far as religion, and it's hard to reconcile. And this is a very, in a lot of ways, religious community. Reconcile that with some of the tenets behind, or the ideas behind diversity and inclusion. I think where people tend to get hung up, though, is that you have to fully diversity and inclusion is about accepting people, whoever they are, where they're at, all of that, without, and including those differences and everything else, without treating them differently because of those differences. Not treating them differently, but treating them badly because of those differences. I think if you can get past that, I don't think anybody's ever asking anyone to change who they are morally or fundamentally or any of that sort of thing. I think if it's done right, everyone's going to feel welcome. Everyone's going to feel welcome, and everyone should also feel comfortable being welcoming of whoever it is. That's just my opinion.
I agree. I think everybody needs to be treated with intrinsic human value, whatever their beliefs are, and not separated because of them. Absolutely.
When you run into people, you don't know what their beliefs are.
No.
Actions always speak louder than words. And before you get into semantics, you have to be interacting.
Right.
And then you can build a common ground. But, like you don't know someone until you shared something with them.
Treating each person with intrinsic human value. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that, can I switch the subject really quick? Something completely unrelated.
Yes.
And Westport is already very well aware that I'm interested in this as well. I really believe that there's an opportunity for perhaps Waunakee and Westport to work together on a community pool.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of value to that.
Okay.
Why do you look at me, Chris? To let me the counter?
Yeah, I'm expecting you to argue. Why should we have a pool?
Not something I have a lot of knowledge in, nor a lot of opinion on. I can actually keep my mouth shut.
So community pool.
Yes, it's going to happen, right? With a dome and everything.
Retract.
I will say what my opinion is on this. The
Yes.
community is going to decide this.
Okay.
It's not, in my opinion, the board may overrule me. I don't know how these guys feel. I don't know how the other four feel for sure. A community pool is a great thing to bring people together.
Yes.
Just like this facility is a great thing. Just like the village center is a great thing. Just like our parks are great places for anybody to go to anytime and our community come together. Now, when the community makes the decision, they're going to have to look at what are the finances. That's generally what people look at. What's the costs, and is it going to sustain itself? And does the cost meet at least at this point the value for what it's doing? My personal opinion on community pool is if we're going to do it, like we do everything else here, we're in one of those facilities. If you go to the village center, you'll see it. Do it right. Okay? Do the research. Make sure that we have the most effective community pool that we can have for everybody, to your point, from before with how we use our funds. So that means you have something that is going to cross all the demographics. Little to somebody that's a senior like me, compared to you guys. I'm a senior, so.
Well, you must be younger than I am.
With that. So in order to accomplish that, and with the little pools that we have in certain subdivisions, and I will say that was before my time on the village board, that those all started in the different communities. Those are great for young children, but that's about it. I don't think a lot of adults are using that. I don't think seniors are using them very much.
Are you using what?
The
little pools,
the little pools
in the area in the different subdivisions. So my opinion again is that to get it voted through, you have to appeal to the entire population. Okay, who it's going to impact. So generally, we had a session on the pool right before COVID, I think it was.
How long before?
In this room, there's probably 60 or 70 people here interested. The ones that all want a pool per year. Those who are against burned. So you don't get a real great cross section from that. But we heard and listened to a lot of the wants of that group. And the thing that I always get hung up on is, all right, if this can break even, this is a great thing. If it can even do better and bring more, what do I say, restaurants, hotels, things like that.
Added value.
Added values around it. Okay, if it's maybe losing a little bit, but all these other added values that are going to bring tax revenue, this has helped sustain it. Okay, that works. 85 days in Wisconsin, It's going to be hard to do that, for it to sustain itself without a major donor. When I say major donor, you could have somebody that would pay for the pool and it still would not be enough because the maintenance and everything else to go with that. And the cost of running them from a lifeguard, it's just overall upkeep to it. So my point with this is I have a hard time supporting something that's 85 days. You said the dome. I can support that concept much better. It's used for 355 days per year. 65. No, because you have to take 5 days to take it down, 5 days to put it on.
Nice, wow.
And
you're really looking at this.
I've done a lot of research on this. Okay, and as far as the major maintenance that are done, those are also done during those 5 days. And we do it at different times. So you have 355 days of usage. Next you have, all right, what are the needs of the community from a pool perspective and the wants? Well, some people want laps, longer pools, some people want a competitive swimming pool. What's the different lengths?
50-yard is the
There's 2 different ones, and so there's very few of one of them in the stadium.
the 50.
So that's one option. Another one, and people say, well, we have the school pool. Our seniors do not go to the senior pool because the water is too cold in that pool. They just don't want to go in. So you have to have a feature that you can have a warm pool. So you could have lap, and then you could have another pool, which is more your water slides and things, and then a zero gravity pool into it. Then you can have your spray park, and all of this can be put under the dome and operated for 355 days. Now, you could add about $2 million to the price tag to put the dome on, and about $15,000 a year for the maintenance of putting it up and down and all that stuff. Unless we use public works people, if they have the time to do it, with all their other responsibilities. Because remember, that's a full week of doing all that. So as far as when we're going to get it, if we're going to get it, I said to Todd, what did I ask for?
Referendum in the spring.
A year? So that's where we're at right now, is a referendum in the spring. Can we partner with Westport? Maybe. Maybe. And we also have other things that you're not aware of that are happening outside of that community pool that may be coming to the community on top of it, where there could be access to pool.
There could be what?
Like what?
Access to pool?
Yeah.
Well, so here's my question. I thought I saw something about the middle school will eventually be taking over the high school building. Is that something that's, and I know this isn't the school board.
No.
No, that's not.
So the high school may be taking over the middle school.
And then we would be building the middle school.
And then new middle school will be built. And I don't know if they're, that's a school board question.
I know it is.
But it may be, I think they have land over by the
Adjacent to the existing communities.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I guess this was the question that I was thinking about in my head is that, and maybe if that's going to be happening, then there would be no renovation of the current pool or whatever, or need for a change in the pool at the high school. I'm just wondering if there are any kind of renovations in that aspect about a village and school collaboration to create a new roof access pool that has a lap and possibly the zero entry pool. Has there been any kind of conversation like that?
Yeah, let me go back then for that. So part of that dome thing is it's open in the summer and closed in the winter.
I get that.
That's just a little different concept than the school. The pool that's there right now is not that old, that they just put in when they remodeled the high school.
What year was that?
15 years old.
15 years old.
Yeah, and the pool before that, if you're familiar with the high school, so where the old gymnasium is, the small one, there's a wall now on one side, the other side goes, I think it goes still open there. I don't even know if those doors even still exist. The state street family, you don't even remember this stuff. But where that old wall was, the pool was right behind it.
Where the commons is.
So, yeah, where the commons is.
The commons is the old pool?
That's where.
Well, it's where it was.
That's where it was.
New structure over.
Yeah.
And it was a smaller pool. You know, you had, I don't even describe it, but I don't think that the school is going to go down that road right now.
Okay. I didn't know if there's been any kind of conversations about that or,
So
a lot of times we don't know
So my goal was to have it on a referendum for spring, but it also, there could be the potential that you have a public-private participation. And there's different organizations that would like to have a dome pool next to them, like a hotel, for example. You might want that, especially when you've got, if wherever it goes, if you've got a hockey facility that has a tournament.
Oh boy, you got big plans.
Medical clinics have, for rehab purposes, have partnered with municipalities, other athletic collaboratives. So,
And any of those future collaborators you're not able to divulge at this time?
It's too early with those conversations.
Yeah.
To have that, but
that's when timing is everything. And like I look at the library is an example of really spectacular timing with the alloy condition.
how long have you been here, guys?
2008.
So did you ever see what was here before the library?
No.
So if you could imagine this being an old, what's the word I want to use here? Industrial foundry, rusted building that was encumbered by trees and rodents and
Look on
everything.
Google Street.
Yeah.
It was Waunakee Alloy, so the company that was here. And it wasn't open, you couldn't even see anything in here.
Right about where I'm sitting is where the puddle of mercury was found.
Oh.
Literally.
So it was just a real bad eyesore here. And there was a lot of back and forth negotiations that were taking place. I'm not going to go into all the details from that back then, but there's beautiful things that can take place in areas that you wouldn't think it necessarily. This was a wonderful spot for the library. And there was, Mariana, was there 13 different sites for libraries we looked at when we went through that committee? I think that's right. They were all around different spots that we could potentially put the library, and we just like hit a home run with what we picked. I firmly believe that. You agree?
Right. Well, and you use this as an example. I think the village center is another example of how things can happen. That was a mechanic factory in that area.
That's why it's called Cannery Row.
Oh.
So an interesting part of that, your comment was, buy it, build it now. Use that money for it now because it might be more expensive later. That actually happened with the village center. So when the canning factory was for sale, the village didn't choose to buy it at that time. And the Cannery Row apartment bought part of it, and then the village ended up paying the same as if they would have bought it all for just the apartment they had. And
Hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
so, but that's what happened. And, so when people say a pool would have been a great spot to be right by the village center, right in the center of town right there. Okay? We don't have the space because that's the reason. One of the reasons, potentially. So, anyways, I think I maybe went really long with the pool comment or community pool, but I might have freaking you guys out with
The
it.
great thing about the library project and the community center is we took care of problem issues in town and built something for the community. So we with one stone, we kind of like killed two chickens or whatever you want to say, because it was like double good for the village, taking care of a really devastating area that was dilapidated and building it into something like this. And the community center was kind of the same.
With that idea of building and large facilities, like Chief, I would want to ask you, where are we on like the feasibility of the police building that we're in?
Yeah, it's something that's actually in the packet that Todd talked about. And then the capital budget, for which we had planned for 23, was a building study just to kind of see what we can do with the building that we're in. We're fine right now, but there's some little things that we can do to make some more room. But in the future, we will run out of some space, and whether or not that building can be renovated to facilitate the needs, or whether or not we can look at other options. That's one of the things that I know Chief Plundle, before I took over, had the same idea: is let's look at it and see what we can do, because let's not stick a lot of money into it to build another garage or something like that. But it's not a long-term solution. So that's one of the things that Todd has in the packet that we talked about. A little bit of remodeling, make some more room for some officers, and then just overall somebody to come and look at the building that has more knowledge on it than myself and any other department member walk around and say, well, I think we can push that wall out if we had to, that type of stuff. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to get some answers to here in the next year or two, just from a long-term planning standpoint. Still come a long way from when I started. We were sharing half the fire department, and the interview, I had to walk in the building, through all the cubicles, past the bathrooms, past the detective's office, out the back door, and in another room to get to the interview room. So we've come a long way. We're not complaining about any means. We're still very happy with where we're at.
Yeah, when I moved to town, where the fire department is now, that's where they had the library, the fire department, the police department, and the village hall. And that really has been expanded. So, yeah.
How many years have you been in the police department?
I came in 2005, and I think if I remember right, we moved to the building that we're in 2006 or 7. So it was a good time, another one of those good timing things where utilities needed to move to get a bigger space, and we took over the utilities building and did some remodeling.
Yeah, again, I can't speak for the people outside of me or the boards that were before me, but that's always been a pretty strong priority is fire, police, security, safety of our community. Consistent, even volunteers, the monies were directed to make sure we have the best fire trucks, to make sure we can get around our community and take care of everybody. So is that fair to say?
Yeah, inside that here, absolutely.
Whether it's finding money for extra body gear or anything that we need.
Social training,
Or
EMS training.
special masks,
Yeah.
for the firefighters. They have plenty of oxygen. So.
Well, from my experience, I think we are exceptionally well positioned for those emergency services. There may be some building needs to talk about, but boy, do I feel lucky to be here. I really do.
Now, fire, one of the things that's going to come from fire is the volunteers. I'd say one of the differences now compared to when I was young is to get on the fire department, you were in a waiting list just trying to become a fireman. Now it's very difficult for us to get volunteers because of the amount of time required for training, and that people have to give up to do that and be effective with it. So that'll be a transition thing, maybe with the board, maybe with the fire districts, before we have paid firefighters at some point. So I'm sure that's not that distant future, unless the volunteer pools change.
Well, I was a volunteer firefighter before for several years, and it's very hard to retain. So everybody's just so busy today.
Waunakee has been very fortunate with EMS and fire volunteers for years. And unfortunately, like Chris said, we cannot bring in the volunteers anymore, and that's why the EMS has gone into paid paramedics, et cetera. For one thing, the volunteers that were there couldn't possibly become a paramedic and volunteer. So as needs change and time changes, circumstances, our services have to evolve with that.
Yeah, I don't think we'd let it go down in any way. That's the thing, we've had such a high degree of service. I don't think we'd ever allow that to happen. At least I would. Again, it's just me. So.
It's a way of putting people first.
Yes. I don't have any updates on that. For those who want to know what I do, I don't have any updates. They're going to build when they're going to build. I shouldn't say I don't have it. I did hear from somebody, so I can't say this is a fact by any stretch, because I didn't come from IV, but I did hear that some Prairie's IV is starting, and they want to do ours with theirs for efficiency with the contractor.
I don't know my breath, because I just hope so, but I'm just going to lay back in it as it comes.
Yeah, I didn't hear that from IV. I heard this from somebody who's in the grocery industry that's part of the IV group in some Prairie.
I hope it's true.
So, I don't have anything else on that.
Waiting for high wears out.
It'll get here. It'll get here. They don't.
Yeah, it'll get here, but I'm just saying, don't wait for it.
Yeah, we could. If we just said we'll give it to us, they'd be built. Anyway, what other topics would you guys like to know about, or anything in the community that you want to hear about? The big topic is going to be our business park, industrial park. We really don't have space left in there, so we're going to figure out where that next piece of land is going to come from and how we're going to develop that. So that'll be something the board's going to have to tackle.
We don't own any of the other land east of Hogan?
Nope, private developers on that land.
So that would not match.
Just like any other land, it doesn't come cheap right now. It doesn't really make any difference. To your point, it's cheaper now than it's going to be 10 years from now.
Oh, it is.
So, any other topics that everyone wants to discuss?
Not that we've got a chief here.
Way past the clock, right? There's not a ton going on in the police department. We have been a really good stretch for a while. I know the burglaries and stolen autos are a pretty hot button issue, and been a really good stretch for a while until the 4th of July weekend. We had a number of cases on the Friday before the 4th, and then the 5th in the afternoon, a couple of stolen cars that we got back right away, but still we're taking nonetheless, and so detectives are working on all those cases. And I was really happy for a good period of time there. We were staying away, and I think that was a part of our night shift people that really started going hardcore, waking people up in the middle of the night saying, hey, your garage door's open, close it, or hopefully can you close it. And I think that helps. I was talking to a sergeant in another agency, and I was commenting on that. I said, I don't want to jinx ourselves, but we've had a good stretch here, because if you go back to 2018-19, we were hit very hard by those groups, and still in 20. And he's like, well, I think word's getting out that one of our detectives does a very phenomenal job on these types of investigations, very well kind of connected. He's got a niche to go through social media and pictures, and he chases down all the leads and writes all the legal paper. He does a good job. And he said, I think the word's getting out that you guys are kind of going farther than most agencies will when we're investigating that. So I took it as a compliment, and that was kind of a huge feather in our hat for a while, but now I'm going to start over a little bit. But we're still doing everything to kind of stop this from happening, and trying to encourage people to have a nightly lockup routine. But I'll be the first to admit, and my wife catches me once in a while, she's like, hey, lock the door. I'm like, of course I did. And she'll walk over and turn the latch, and it's hard because it's as much of a common thing that it is, it still happens, and you forget. And so
even with the garage door, because we walk in at different times, sometimes we forget to put the garage door down, so when we lock the inside door going to the garage, we made it a habit just to look out, and we caught that door open a few times. So
it happens.
I think we're so busy carrying groceries in or whatever, sometimes we just forget to do it.
Yeah. And let's see, other than that, Waunakee went very smoothly from a police department standpoint, and get ready for Waunakee here. Yeah.
On the car theft issue and like burglary garages and stuff, how, like, percentage-wise have you seen are actually forced entry comparatively to unlocked?
Yeah, we've had very, very few forced entry cases, and really the last one that I can truly think of that was a forced entry was right at the end of last school year. We had a window in a daycare that was knocked out to grab a purse, and that was kind of a step back too, because we haven't seen any really on the forced entry part of it. A lot of it's just been a crime spot opportunity, and there's a lot of Ring doorbell cameras are very, very popular right now, which has really helped us out quite a bit. So anybody that has had a case like this near them has probably had us knocking on your door saying, hey, can we see your camera video? But the groups they're very quick, they're very efficient. They're pulling up, they're jumping out, they're checking, they're back in, and they're going to the next one, and they cover a lot of ground. Actually, on the Friday before the 4th of July, that Saturday morning, one of our officers coming to work actually came across them at 4:30 in the morning, and he was driving up, and I'm like, oh, that's double parking, that's kind of weird. And they were way up on the north side of town, but we had cases that were, further down Division Street, kind of towards the next bridge area as well, and that's a lot of ground to cover when you're checking towards everywhere you go. But so not seeing a lot of the forced entry ones, but that it doesn't make you feel any better when someone's walking into your house and taking your stuff or your garage.
So to that point, as citizens, because you guys can't be everywhere all the time, as citizens, we could make a huge dent in that by, and it's not about victim blaming, but how can we be proactive? We can help you by doing those things, closing the garage doors, keeping the cars closed, keeping things out of, plain view in the vehicles that somebody might want to get in.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of that too. Even just being a good neighbor, if you see your neighbor's got a garage door open and shoot them a text message quick and say, hey, just so my garage door is open, and it can happen very quickly. It's in and out. So we'll keep chugging along at that approach. It certainly has kind of helped us out. And outside of that, from the police department standpoint, really, getting ready for the festivals, Waunakee coming up, but we're planning for our national night out. Kind of excited to get back to some community policing programs that, like everybody took a break last year with COVID. Just
I don't want to go necessarily go there or not. Because you've had the opportunity before to come, we've invited you to come to the diversity page to utilize Zoom, and you answered a lot of questions there, and you spoke a lot about what you guys are doing as far as training and all that kind of stuff, which was pretty impressive to me personally anyway. And I really appreciate that you did that, because it also gave people an opportunity to ask a lot of questions about, what you're doing in the department. Are you willing and able to do something again? I know that there's some questions because there were some statistics that came out nationally that do not, especially from a demographic makeup, does not look great for Waunakee as far as, arrests and drugs and all of that kind of stuff. So there's been questions about training and what kind of training you guys are doing. Is there an opportunity at some point where you'd be able to kind of share that kind of stuff again with the public as far as what the department does? I know that you've been I know that when we originally spoke, I think like a year ago, it was at the very height of a lot of things. I think like the Kenosha thing had happened, and there were some things that I know we spoke definitely about, some of the training that you guys were doing as far as use of force and things like that. And I know that you were very proactive. You had said that you were very, very proactive. We also spoke about some other things as far as making sure that the officers are ready and trained as far as like use of force and things like that. So you've been proactive about that. But some of these other issues, I believe that there is some concern around that, and I'm just wondering if there's ever an opportunity where you'd be able to share some of that stuff.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that anytime. I learned a little bit about, I think the comment you're talking about that was posted on there. I had to do some statistics with people of color and arrest rates. And, first I will say I've never heard of that website, so I'd like to do some research on where they're getting some of their numbers from. But I'll also follow up and say that our statistics probably are a little bit out of sync than what you would expect. And part of that goes to your point in the theft from auto cases and the burglary cases and the theft from auto and stolen auto cases. So I said that we had a ton of those cases in 2017, 18, and 19, and still getting a fair amount now. And I also said we have a really good detective who does a good job at putting those cases together. And part of that comes with, those are cases that get sent to the district attorney's office, those are arrests that are made in those cases. And one of the things that I'll kind of share with you to kind of try to put in perspective a little bit, no matter what your skin color is, if we go to a domestic, it's usually one person here and one person here. And we do an investigation. If there's a crime that's been committed, we pick the predominant aggressor, and they're the ones that typically go to jail. It's a state law that requires mandatory arrest. That's one person, one arrest, okay? In most of these cases of vehicles that are being broken into, houses that are being broken into, cars that are being stolen, they're involving 3, 4, 5, 6 people sometimes. They're coming out in crews of 2 cars, packed full. And, then they're coming and they're stealing gas and they're using credit cards that they steal. And we're kind of putting this all together, and, they're using the credit cards that are on camera, they're using the gas station on camera, and then we're sharing this with this huge network of investigators throughout the county and sometimes multiple counties to say, hey, does anybody know who this is? And we're tracking it all down. Those lead to arrests. So now you might have one burglary, one stolen auto, one theft from auto where you've charged 4 people that were all there, compared to the one person in your domestic, or the one person that trespass a piece of property. So I'm sure the numbers, although the numbers that I heard sound a little high, I'll be honest, I'd like to look at them a little bit more. But there are probably some numbers that are off. And, we're using video cameras, videos. We're not singling people out. This is where the investigations and things like that take us. So I think that's where some of those numbers kind of come from a little bit. We have been very successful in holding people accountable and finding evidence to charge people. And I think that's where some of those deals.
Chief, what are the demographics of the people that are coming? Are those people that are being arrested for those car thefts and burglaries, are they residents here? Are they not residents here? Is there any demographic anomalies in them that are affecting your numbers?
Well, we've had some that we were connected for a while was going on where one of them was a resident here, and some family lived here. There's some connections here. We have seen all demographics, really black, white, and other diverse groups. Primarily, they have been people of color, but we have also seen some of the other ones. I mean, we literally just go where the evidence takes us, but that has primarily been people of color in those cases as of late.
One comment, I don't know if you know about Citizens Academy, but it's a program that emergency services has together. I think Adam's department kind of spearheads it. But it's hands-on experience for citizens to go and do different things, learn about fire, EMS, and the police department. And it's very beneficial, and hopefully, I'm hoping Adam will be able to do it again this fall. But it's very informative and it's very hands-on. And that's what I really like, is the fact that it's very hands-on, and they put you through scenarios that you may think it'd be easy. It's not easy. So anyway, they have it in the fall, so to have the time and see it, sign up for it. It is a commitment, but it's worth it.
And so, Chief, I just wanted to clarify. So, if you're saying that a large amount of those people that are doing those burglaries and vehicle thefts, that you're proactively doing a good job of arresting, happen to be people of color, that could be skewing your numbers. That's not anything you guys are doing.
Right. Well, we're obviously working on the investigations. There's statistics that come from our department. And there's, in and of itself, I think it's easy for people to look at that and say, holy cow, there's a huge problem going on in Waunakee. They're racist cops or anything like that. I'm just saying that there's reasons for some of it, for sure. And again, I just heard about this tonight, hours ago. That's one of the reasons why I came here, is because I want to be able to try to answer some questions. Certainly we'll look into it some more, but it's not something that we're shocked to hear that those numbers would be up, again, from most cases. And I think we took a good step at the end of last year. I have to go back and look at the annual report, but we definitely saw a drop in our burglaries and our stolen autos and our theft from auto cases in 2020. My hope is that we'll continue that in 21. And then, I think that'll be a test to see if those numbers are coming down as well from what we're probably talking about. But to your point, Cass, I'd be happy to come and talk to that group anytime. And if you have my email address, we can set something up and be happy to do that.
I want to do that Citizens Academy.
It's,
Do you get a gun?
No, we don't want it.
Do you get an outfit?
We don't have an outfit.
I don't think you're focusing on
Well, that's the important stuff. The outfit, a little badge thingy, and a gun. Those are the important things.
So, yeah, we're working on the schedule right now, so our hope is to have it here this fall.
You even get to use the thing with the fire department that cuts the door out, Jaws of Life, and
Oh my
the
gosh.
whole works.
Okay. See, sign me up. This sounds like a party.
Do you have force-on-force scenarios in that academy?
We do some defense and arrest tactics. We don't really have our participants do so much of that. We do a session on firearms and deadly force, which is what Niall was kind of talking about a little bit, where we'll teach people how to hold it. It's a simutation gun, so it shoots a soap bullet. But then we actually do have some scenarios that you go through where you have to make a decision based on what you learned about whether or not you would consider using deadly force. And then we have another night that is more of like the hands-on part of things, where we talk about de-escalation, we talk about non-lethal use of force like taser, pepper spray, things, other tools that you can use in those cases. So it is pretty hands-on. It's one of my favorite programs. I've been involved in it for a long time, and looking forward to it going again.
In EMS, they have mannequins, you put IVs in and do the cups or whatever, they put it on the neck, and it's very hands-on. It's very good.
Have you done it?
Yes, I did.
That's why you're so excited about it.
Yeah, it was very eye-opening, it was very enjoyable, and it was fun. I was with a very fun group of people.
We've seen all ages already. 18, I think the oldest person we had was
And it's,
maybe in the 70s. It's all, and you can do as much as you want or as little as you want.
and the fire truck would take you up in their fire truck, up on the ladder, and it goes up.
Nice.
Yeah, spectacular view of Waunakee. Have you done it, Chris?
I have not. They did volunteer me to be the guy who gets tased, but other than that,
You know what?
the guy who gets tased.
I was just gonna ask.
You can get involved. Listen, you can taste if you want to, but I
No, I heard that. No, I want to do the tasting.
See, they did that too. It was your choice whether you wanted it or not. I'm not sure I'm not doing it.
One thing I'll add, take a look at this, the comments, I think it was in the Waunakee diversity page. I think that's where the comments were that you were referring to.
About no
About
actually.
stats.
Oh, stats.
Yeah, I think it was Waunakee diversity page. There's also a question, something about the police commission's role in their meetings. And just for folks to be sort of clear, the police commission is responsible for hiring, firing, and discipline. That's their role, period. And you could maybe talk about, well, we also have just a police committee.
Oh.
And that committee is,
Actually, 2 of our
Oh, yeah.
members are on it right now.
and you're hoping to use that committee in some new ways. Did you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. So the commission, just to touch on the real brief on the hiring, firing, and discipline. So I'm happy to say that we don't have a lot of discipline within our department. You know, in the last, I think 5 years, we've had one citizen complaint, which I think we've talked about all the numbers before. So thankfully, we're not bringing cases of discipline to them. We have been a lot because we've had so much turnover. They were in charge of or overseeing my hiring. You know, every time there's a promotion, anybody that's going to get promoted or hired in our department goes in front of the police commission. The police committee, which Sam and Nyla are part of right now, that's different. They hear appeals on liquor license that will be denied, our ordinance on vicious or dangerous animals. If we make a decision, or if I make a decision to take an animal out of the village because it's dangerous, if somebody wants to appeal that, they would go in front of the police committee. One of the things that we started in, when was the first? We did the first one in April. I think we did the first one in April. Is every 3 months now I've started to meet with the police committee. So we just had our second meeting last night where we report out on way more things. We talk about call numbers, we talk about major cases, they get an update on every use of force that we've had, that we've evaluated, we talk about training that we're going to, one of the things that you mentioned and that we're doing, community events, any major compliments that we're getting towards our department, any complaints that we're receiving. So kind of a report out so that they're well aware of what we're doing in the police department. You know, and so with that, and then we share anything major going on with our board members on a bi-weekly basis. Obviously, Todd's involved in the day-to-day operations and I are in contact regularly. So trying to be more forthcoming and more open about what's going on. I don't think it's a matter of the police department never, we didn't have anything to hide, but I just think it's kind of this changing environment that people want more accountability from the police department. Certainly understand that, and more openness, and that's kind of an effort to try to be able to do that so that hopefully our community members understand that we are reporting out to people. We're not just kind of keeping everything inside of the closed door.
And the police committee meetings are open public meetings.
Really? Oh, that's good to know. And is that those meetings that are made for the public can see? I'm assuming.
I think we had an open comment. I don't think there's a specific open comment on the agenda, but
A number of our other committees include a public comment period, and I mean, you could, it would sort of run similarly as it does with the board.
Point of information, if there's a police committee though to do with an individual circumstance, then I would be able to go with it.
as far as the appeals go, I have to check on that.
I think it was happening in open session.
Yeah. I would double check.
I did not realize that. Okay.
We've never had anybody turned away, we'll say that. It's not typically, it hasn't been in the past, they're very popular, but it certainly doesn't mean that we wouldn't want to.
And are you guys looking at, because there is a big push towards not accepting you guys to kind of fulfill every need, even though that's how police traditionally function, unfortunately. Are you guys working on anything to perhaps work with other services and things, like whether that's mental health organizations or social service type drug and alcohol type.
Sure. Well, I think the popular one probably that you're getting on is the mental health part, which you read the most about. And what you're seeing is the city and even maybe a little bit the county starting to roll those programs out. That'd be a pretty big undertaking, I think, for the village of Waunakee to take out on its own and say, okay, we're going to have a mental health officer riding with a paramedic. So I think the plan, and while it probably won't happen fast enough, would be that as the county and the city hopefully see some very positive results in that they continue to build on that program that eventually opens up to other municipalities, you know, and becomes a county-wide approach. And at least that's what I'm hoping for, because that would be a huge undertaking for a small police department such as ours to take it on their own. Now, that doesn't mean that we still don't work with those agencies. You know, the one that's starting up right now is using Journey Mental Health. Those are the people that we call when we have people in crisis. You know, as far as any other programs, I mean, we've always worked with safe communities, things like that for addiction. You know, as we have people that are, you know, that are overdosing and things like that, we'll reach out to them the next day a lot of times about getting some help and whether or not they're interested in that. You know, it kind of goes back to what Chris was talking about earlier, where, you know, people have to want help. They have to want to do that, because if they don't, they're not going to do it. Same thing with any person who's suffering from, you know, alcoholism. And, you know, it's like, we'd love to give you help, but you have to want to get help and you know, help you through that. So we're certainly working on hopefully pointing in that direction, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time for that to develop, and it's kind of just getting going right now. But certainly we're open to it. I don't think you've come across any police officer that would be like, yeah, no, I want to go to all mental health calls, you know what I mean? Because we don't have the best approach right now, and that if they're taken into, you know, an emergency attention and we're driving them all the way in the bag, nobody wants to do that. We don't want them to do that in the back of the squad car. It ties up a lot of resources to be able to do that. You know, we're doing other things as well, and hopefully, you know, there's some things coming down the pipeline to help that out.
Because Madison is using one of their paramedic crews with a Journey?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
As a pilot program?
Yeah. I thought the county has some kind of connection with that too, where they've been riding around with some of the county people. So I just think it takes a little while, because those are fairly, even though like Colorado, I believe, has been doing it, there might be another place. I just think it's going to take a little bit to get some numbers to show that it's working, and I think once you see that, you'll likely see it roll up into a more popular and available.
And of course, they can only respond, I suppose, with non-violent.
I'm not sure what the parameters are, but I would assume so.
Thank you.
And I will say that Adam also communicates with me and Todd as things happen, like this morning.
Right.
We got one. We had a box truck near the roundabout that sprung a bad fuel leak. And then they went and ended up over Klein Drive. So they shut down Klein Drive for now. So that's the kind of stuff that I did to Todd kids. We won't know if that is necessary too with this Facebook. And by the way, do you want to introduce?
Okay. Do you want to introduce? Go ahead.
Sure. I am the new communications and management intern, so most of the communications that the village puts out is through me. So
He's kind of paying a little extra attention to addressing what might be incorrect information as it's flowing out of various sources, trying to be accurate about it from the village. And we're doing other things to step up our communications. Dave's got a number of strategies that he's working on. So for some reason he's studying student management. He wants to do that someday.
yeah, I have a master's in public administration at the University of Kansas. So this is my 1-year placement. If it works out, it works out. So yeah.
So this is an interesting thing about listening sessions. So, did you learn anything tonight so far? What you've heard?
We're getting a pool. That's what I got out of this whole thing. The pool.
So that's a similar problem with Facebook. It's great right here.
You just started the rumor.
Words have power.
Yes, they do.
The Constitution does afford liberty, but you took too much just then.
Anyway.
Just like in our record it says, words have power.
But this also
Bring it
says
back.
this tonight says a lot about our community currently. In my words, right now, that there's 3 residents here, 2 board members, and we'll just say 3 village staff. And the rest of the population isn't here. So is it that they don't care? They don't have the time?
Or that they believe that they live in a wonderful community.
Or they just think that the community's great? Or they may be fearful of coming from. Because I'm a big, bad, intimidating person.
I don't think it's you that people that get fearful of. It's the overall, like we talked about before, backlash that you can get from any type of view.
Sure.
And a lot of people aren't comfortable coming in and doing that.
I think it's where people are out about living their lives right now. Because
Yes.
the pandemic and vaccines and all of that kind of stuff, and people are antsy to, kind of get back to some of this.
So I'm pretty sure I could come about 22 or 23 of these, and I don't think we've exceeded 10 people in one meeting. Maybe 2, the one in Zoom, we did that.
And the one on Braxis.
We didn't have a lot of them. Very few of them have had a lot of people.
Really?
And generally those ones were a controversial topic at the time.
I remember when it was Roberta and I and myself. Yeah.
Yeah, but to me it sends a message that overall everything is really going well in the community.
That was the one.
Moving forward with what people want. So I think that's happening right now in the village. Our staff is really doing a great job. I'll compliment all of you with everything.
Katie?
Yes.
So, the communications.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Solomon has owed a video to the swap page for quite a long time. And I think he needs systems involved.
So
I'm advocating for TikTok video.
you know Kylie West?
Yes, I have. She's fantastic.
So Todd moved her out of her office. So she's been feisty now for a little while.
Oh.
So she generally does all the scheduling of my stuff. So if Gabe, let Kylie know that I need to schedule a
Yes.
video time with Cass to get it done. That's the person who really does that for me.
There you go.
I'm keeping track of it. So
So Kylie's line.
yes,
Oh, I can get her.
It'll happen.
because Gabe's doing it now and Kylie really
Yay.
will happen. So
Fine.
and-
Now, I don't want you to feel intimidated, but the chief did an excellent video. Kind of like really raised the bar. So, not that it's a competition.
You guys are starting to dance off videos,
There
are
was
you?
no dancing, we had a long talk about dancing, there was no dancing, but yeah.
Yes. Yes.
like I'm gonna argue that he carries it down. No chance. He wouldn't. But no, yes, I need to do that. It was. It's funny because News 3 asked me to do a thing for one of them the day of the event, and it's like I am all over the park constantly moving. And he got there and Black Hawk was landing, so I had to get over where the Black Hawk was landing to make sure people weren't in the wrong spot. So he carried all his equipment and everything and ran all the way across the park following me. I had a cart that was taking me, so he was carrying me all running. And then after that, I had to go somewhere else, so he kept following me all around the park. And it took him probably an hour and a half to get the 10 seconds that they put on the news. So
At least he's willing to run with
he
you.
was willing to run. I mean, I felt bad because it was hot. It was hot. It was hot. So
And by the way, thank you for one home. I enjoy coming, no matter what I'm doing, coming back to Waunakee on 4th of July and being able to see fireworks. That's something my children didn't have growing up here, and I think it's a very nice family day. Thank you.
It is wonderful to come to this community and experience that. I was sick over this last one, I'm like bedbound, but man, is it unbelievable. I mean, especially like little kids and stuff. I'm good now. All the COVID tests are negative. I was wondering myself. But no, that is such a wonderful thing that this community puts on. And like talking about being a welcoming community, oh my gosh. I mean, that was one of the first things we experienced here when we moved in June of 2017. And it's just, I continually become more and more happy with my situation and landing here at Waunakee. So thank you all to
thank you to the party. I'm one of many. But
Yep.
it's
absolutely.
And one of the things I enjoy about it, I have grandkids got your own party line, so it works. And it's a good time to get to know your neighbors.
Absolutely.
And I do appreciate openness in these type of settings going on, and I think a lot of communities are doing it. But it's very much appreciated. I'll continue to ask for clarity. but I appreciate you know, taking the time to listen and have a free-flowing discussion, which you don't get at the public comment period. So this is much appreciated.
No, we can't.
Right. It's against the rules, absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't get that when they watch these meetings. But yeah.
So thank you for coming tonight, everybody. We're only on time. We never get done on time for this. I swear. It's always about 10, 15 minutes or more.
Well, I've never met the two of you, so I don't meet you.
My name's Greg.
Greg,
It is. Your name is? I will say that no